There's a verse in Scripture that says this. So then, my dear friends, stand firm and steady. Keep busy. Always in your work for the Lord, since you know that nothing you do in the Lord's service is ever useless. This is found in 1 Corinthians 15:58. There's a book that I have that probably never really got published. You won't find it on Amazon. Can't get it anywhere. It's actually pretty old. They probably made very, very few copies of it. And I'm fortunate that it even still exists, because it could have been lost in the hurricane last year, because my mother lost all of her books in her home. And this was one of my mother's books. But when I was down there last time visiting with them, I swiped it off the shelf because the story behind it was something I wanted to remember. And so I was talking to Mom about it a while ago, saying that it was the story that I wanted to use as my final story. And she was sad because she said, well, I lost all my books and I don't have that one anymore. But I said, oh, I have it. And I took it off your shelf. And so I have probably one of the only copies of it that still is in existence. The book is well over 30 years old. It's about a husband and wife team that were affectionately known by everybody that knew them as Uncle Paul and Aunt Mary. And Uncle Paul and Aunt Mary, they first met in 1928, so this is a much older story. But it tells a wonderful story, and it tells about a special place that's very similar to a place that some of you have gotten to experience. Some of you have gotten to go to High Point Camp. And this is the story of another camp. This is the story of a camp called Camp Ider Haji. And that's a really weird name. How did they come up with Ider Haji? Well, it's the first two letters of several important words in an old Christian hymn that was sung many, many years ago. The Christian hymn sings about how I'd rather have Jesus than silver or gold. And so if you take the I'd rather in the R-A, have, H-A, have Jesus, J-E, you get I'd Rahaji. And so that's how they came up with the name for the camp. And Uncle Paul and Aunt Mary were the ones that started this camp. And they were so dedicated and faithful to building this camp from nothing. It did not exist, and they built it from the ground up in the mountains of Colorado. And that was really, really challenging because, I mean, you think about just living here. You go outside and you notice how hard the ground is right now because it's so frozen. Just imagine trying to dig in that and keep water flowing outside, you know, when it's freezing like this. Well, they're in Colorado. It's even crazier. And they're trying to make this camp that is in Colorado. And when I started reading the book to just learn more about the camp, and the reason I was reading the book in the first place was because it was the camp that my mom had gone to when she was a teenager. And then she ultimately grew up and she became a camp counselor and worked at the camp. And so so this camp was very special to her. And ultimately, when she met my father, they didn't meet at the camp. They met at a Christian college. But when it was time to get married, they had their wedding at the camp. And so I knew this was a very special place for them, this camp. And so I wanted to learn more about it. I wanted to know what was special about this camp. And so I started reading the book. And it was really neat to realize just what this camp was like. And it really was not so much that the camp had amazing buildings or amazing activities or anything. It was really the camp had Uncle Paul and Aunt Mary. That's what made it special. And There's so much about the life of that husband and wife team that's shared in this storybook. I don't have time to really go into it, but there's a few parts of it that really stood out when I was reading it. And a couple of them were, basically they were just dealing with obstacles and challenges that were happening to Uncle Paul and Aunt Mary when they were trying to build this camp. The first one that I encountered in the book that really stood out to me was there was a time at this camp when they had a water crisis. Their well that they had, the way that they had water to source the camp, especially for their kitchen, to cook with, wash dishes, and clean everything, that well that they had dried up. And there was no more water in the camp. And so the only way they could get water was actually from a lake, and it wasn't close by. And so the idea was that the only way they could keep water going in the camp was to bucket carry it into the camp. And they imagined trying to take care of the water needs for several hundred kids and bring in all the water by bucket. The story goes here that not having water made for very primitive conditions. The dirty dishes were washed in 3 large tubs balanced on cabin tables. Shower was almost a dirty word. The children didn't go home very clean, but they didn't seem to mind, according to the camp counselors. And it says, even in the troubled times, the Lord blesses the efforts of faithful Christians. And it says here, a rancher donated an old Dodge Army truck, and a contractor in another town gave the camp a 600-gallon tank. So the water hauled from the creek, from Deer Creek, was hauled in this truck, and it helped them finish out the year, that camp year. It also says that they had no money to professionally drill a new well, and so Uncle Paul got the idea, we'll just dig one ourselves. And so they arranged to have around-the-clock groups of Sunday school volunteers from the local church to come at 7 p.m. and dig till midnight on this well. Now remember, they're digging in Colorado. They're dealing in ice, brick-hard, ground. And it says that here, only the Lord knows of the danger and hard work. And only a man like Uncle Paul, with the Lord's help, could have convinced the workers to come out in the first place. It says here that there was another man named Doc, and he stepped in to take over the task of scheduling the volunteer digging teams and the shifts for the round-the-clock, all-season digging. All season in Colorado. Snow, ice, digging year-round. And it says that they continued doing this day in and day out, the sacrifice and the dedication for it. But they continued at this task for 7 years, digging. And finally, only then did they get water from that well. There's another short story about a scare that they had at the camp. We don't really deal with this sickness and disease anymore because we have a vaccination for it. At some point, you all probably had a shot for polio, a polio vaccination. And there's very few cases of polio anymore because we can treat it. We can take the vaccine for it. But back at the time of this story and back at the time of this camp, it was long before they had that. And they didn't, they did not, you have to understand that this camp is taking place and being done at the time long before phones, computers, internet, TV, even in a lot of cases, they didn't even have electricity. They used, for lighting, they used fires in fireplaces, and so this is back there, and so a lot of things were very primitive, very rustic, very outdoors camping like, and So one summer, one of the counselors got very sick at camp, and they took her into the clinic that was in a nearby town, and they diagnosed her as having polio. Now polio is like getting that, at that time, that was like the worst thing that you could get, because nobody really understood how to treat it or deal with it, and it was contagious. Other people could get it, and if you got it, you know, you could get really sick, and in many cases die from it. And so it was a very scary thing that you did not want to get, and it had a lot of damaging effects, even for those that did survive. And so they feared the worst, and many of the other kids that were in the same cabin with that counselor also started getting sick. And so Uncle Paul is sending them home, trying to stop the spread of what they thought was polio. And for something like that at a camp, that will shut you down, and you'll be done. Because again, they feared that, you know, they would have to, that the whole place would be contaminated, and there would be no way to stop it. Well, of course, everybody gathered in very intense prayer about this situation, and eventually word came back from the clinic that the counselor actually did not have polio, that she had caught something else. It had gone to the other kids, but it wasn't polio, and everybody got better. And so it was a real answer to prayer that the camp did not have to close because of that. There's also a part in here where they were building a new building, and they didn't have some of the modern building stuff that we have today. You know, if any of you have seen these big construction sites, come on in, Chris. We got some up here in the front. If you've ever seen the big trucks out, like, you know, as you're driving in, that are building the new roads and stuff, well, they didn't have that up in the mountains. You know, pickup truck maybe at best. And when they were trying to build this cabin, in order to make the cement, to lay the foundation, they didn't have that big cement mixer, you know, with the big drum that spins around and pours the cement out on the ground. They didn't have that. They actually had to have wheelbarrows, and they had to have big, you know, spatulas and sticks, and they had to hand mix all that cement, and then they had to wheelbarrow that cement wherever they needed it. And so it was very, very hard work. It says here, sore backs and calloused palms were the normal conditions of the workers. Now, oftentimes in some of these challenges, Uncle Tom, he was a real motivator, and he was always trying to encourage the workers to just keep going, just keep doing things, keep working, keep serving. And that was oftentimes his answer for some of these big problems. Is, you know, how do we overcome this? You know, what do we do, Uncle Paul? And he had this saying that he said. He said, well, actually, before he'd say anything, when he didn't know what to do, oftentimes you could find him out at the wood pile, just splitting wood, chopping wood. And the reason he would be doing this is because chopping wood was very, very important, because that was their heat. They didn't have central air and heat like we've got in here. Their heat was supplied by fire in a fireplace. And so all the cabins, all the buildings at camp, just imagine those of you that have been to High Point Camp, every one of those buildings would have to be heated by a fireplace. So every single one of those would need wood. And so there was a constant need for firewood. And so oftentimes Uncle Paul could be found out chopping wood. And whenever there would be this big disaster at camp, there was another time that he had an adopted son, and his adopted son was oftentimes responsible for taking care of these fires in the fireplaces. And one time, accidentally, he did not pick up kerosene to light the fire. He actually picked up white gas. And when he picked up the white gas and used that, basically he created a small explosion. And it says here in the story that the next thing I knew, my eyelids were very hard to open, and the hair on my head was at least 3 inches shorter, if I had any at all. Needless to say, the crazy bucket that had the white gas in it was also on fire to boot. And he says, I remember spending long hours replacing all the tile on the floor in the rec hall. Another lesson of fire. And that was not the only time that they dealt with fire. In fact, it says between 1973 and 1977, in just 4 years, they dealt with 4 major fires. Of course, it makes sense because they had fires everywhere in fireplaces all over the camp. So trying to keep fires contained and under control was very difficult. Uncle Paul and Aunt Mary's retirement home burned. The front end of the youth center. There was a longhouse at TP camp and a trailer by the ranch camp. And they all burned down. And but every time that there were these struggles, Uncle Paul had a saying. And his saying, he said, well, I just keep chopping wood. Just keep chopping wood. That was his saying. Just kept going. Just keep carrying on. Then they were able to rebuild all those houses even better than they had before. And today, this camp is still in operation. It's still going on many, many years after Uncle Paul and Aunt Mary. They've long since passed away. But they established it and started it and laid the foundation for it. And hundreds of kids every summer reap the benefits of what Uncle Paul simply did. And that was he kept chopping wood. And that's what I want for each of you, especially my teens. This message is really for them today. It's what I want to challenge each of you to do after I'm gone. I want you to keep chopping wood. If you've done puppets, keep doing puppets. If you've done music, keep doing music. If you volunteer in Awana, keep volunteering in Awana. And when your life changes, just like mine, keep pursuing opportunities to chop wood for God. I have an axe here that was given to me a couple years ago that says, keep chopping wood on it. And this was given to me by 2 young people that some of you did have the opportunity to meet one Vacation Bible School because I brought them here. And their names were Kendall and Joshua. And they came and they were a part of a Vacation Bible School. And the reason I brought them up was because I wanted to give them kind of reward for their faithfulness. Because when I was a part of my first church that was in Texas, where I served before I came here, I had a group of young people, just like you all, that are in the back there. And they were doing the same kind of things that you all are doing here for me now. And when I got ready to leave them, it was the same difficult situation. And I thought, what is the one thing that I want them to remember when I'm gone? There's so many things that could be said. There's so many things that could be talked about. But what's the one thing that I would want? And for them, when I talked to them, when I got them all together, I shared the story of Uncle Paul and Aunt Mary. And I said, I just want you to keep chopping wood. I want you to keep serving the Lord. And they did. A lot of them didn't, but Kendall and Joshua did. And they also left me with this little guy here that has sat on my desk ever since. And there were a lot of times that I needed to look at this and remember to keep chopping wood because things were very difficult. Things will not be easy. They weren't for Uncle Paul. They weren't for these guys. They went through several natural disasters and hurricanes. Joshua and Kendall, they lost everything themselves. But they're still serving the Lord. Joshua now, this is Joshua now. And Joshua is post-college. They've graduated from college. And this is Joshua. He's working at a food line at Christmas, just this last Christmas, right after Hurricane Harvey, handing out things that people needed. and helping in the community. And this is Kendall today. And Kendall is a graphics designer. She works for a company that designs board games, which is really kind of fun. But on the side, she's used her graphic skills and her computer editing to help me. And I'm sure she helps others. She's designed several logos and different things that I've used. The Godrod shirts that many of you have, she designed them. She's still chopping wood. I'm very proud of them. Now you might be asking, well, I want to keep chopping wood, but how do you keep chopping wood? Well, you can only keep chopping wood if you're doing it for the right reason. It is my hope that you haven't done it just because I've asked you to. If you have, you won't continue doing it after I'm gone, because I'm not there to poke you and tell you to do it. I won't be there anymore to ask you to. I hope you haven't done it because it was fun. Has been. But in many ways, I was the reason that it was fun. You know, you were able to come in to Eternal Express or any of the other productions we've done, and it was there. That was because I had spent the last 2 or 3 days doing all the work to set it. Hard work. Now, you have to make it fun. And that's probably not going to be any fun. It's hard work to enjoy the moments of fun. This is the way it is with anything in life. You all have jobs that you have to work in order to have money to do the things that you really want to do, those fun things. I'm sure Marie's learned that. In order to enjoy that cup of coffee that's so fun, you had to work for it. It's no different in church. You won't continue if you're just looking for fun. I hope you don't do it even for the kids, because there's going to be times when they'll disappoint you, frustrate you, make you want to quit. There are good times too. A lot of them. They'll hug you, make cards for you. But you can't do it just for them. And I hope you don't do it if you're trying to get anything out of it for yourself, because you're going to have to give way more than you're going to get. I hope, though, that you ultimately do what you do for God, out of gratitude for what He has done for you. He gave you His life. He gave you everything. And continues to give you everything every day. And I hope that's why you give back to Him. Just out of a small token appreciation for what He's meant to you. You have a hope and a future because of Him, not because of anybody else. A few other random points that I thought of, for this last message is, in order to keep chopping wood, you have to take care of yourself. I never would have thought that I would have said anything like that, because I was young and unconquerable at one time. But life has a way of beating you up and running you through the ringer. And many of you have been run through the ringer already in your life. And so I've become much more aware of this idea of doing everything that you can to take care of yourself. And you have to take care of yourself in 3 ways: with your mind, your spirit, and your body. All 3 of them. So for your mind, read books, not just internet memes. Spend time in the Word and prayer every day. And I'm not saying that because I'm a pastor. Okay? I'm saying that because I found that's what works. I've survived this long in the life that I have because of this. Of spending time in the Word and prayer every day. A good devotional book is always good too. That's what's really going to give you what you need to keep chopping wood and do it the right way. Also, as you think about your mind, your eyes are the doorway to your mind. So you have to be very careful what you put in front of your eyes. This is especially true for me. It's been a very sensitive area. I have to be very careful what I look at. because it will cause me to have very bad thoughts and think wrong things and negative things and derail me completely. So I have to be very careful, as I'm sure many of you know, that this is an area that you need to be very careful in. You need to be careful with magazines, TV, YouTube, Facebook, pretty much everywhere. You really have to be on guard. You can't keep chopping wood the right way if your mind's all jacked up, because you can't focus on anything. And it'll mess you up in all those ways. If you don't control your mind, you don't control what you look at, it'll not only mess you up mentally, it'll mess you up emotionally, physically, and in every way. Now for your spirit, we're all driven relationally. So I encourage you to spend less time on your phone and more time talking to real people and building relationships. These are the people that will help you keep chopping wood when you need to. Your Facebook and Instagram followers never will. The world revolves around real people and real relationships that you spend with every day. These are the real people, not people that are online. Spend more time with these people than online. And for your body, be way better with it than I was. Don't trash your good health and your body early in life by doing stupid stuff as much as possible. You'll need that body for the next 50 years or more, hopefully. That skateboard jump may be cool for 15 seconds, but you aren't going to like the permanent pain you have to live with for 50 years. Of course, in a more practical sense, the physical work you do also affects your health, both positively and negatively. So be careful with the work environment, the places you choose to be and work. They can do the same thing. And also other people, through relationships. They can either strengthen you or hurt you. They can help you physically, like doctors and good friends. Very good friends. Or they can be bad influences. You know those people too. Like gangs, bad boyfriends, bad girlfriends. They can ruin your health and well-being very, very quickly. Your life can be trashed in one night, and then it's over. You can't keep chopping wood if you're in too much pain and you've wrecked your life. Eat right and be physically active. Sound like Pastor Steve. Ugh. But I've learned it's very necessary. Allowing yourself to get out of shape and overweight, it puts you in an early grave. I've watched several people that are very close to me have that happen to them. And so it's become a very sensitive area for me. You can't keep chopping wood if you're dead. Just a couple final thoughts here. Understand that most people aren't going to keep chopping wood. They're going to stop. They were only chopping wood because the one that was in charge was, or their friends were. And now that their friends have stopped, because the one who was chopping wood is no longer there, they don't anymore. Don't base your decision to keep chopping wood because of what others do or don't do. If God wants you to keep chopping wood in a very specific way, then ignore everyone else. Keep chopping wood. Purpose in your heart that you're going to chop wood. And you have to remind yourself every day, I have to. I have to get up and I have to tell myself, I can do this for another day. So remind yourself every day to keep chopping wood. And so pick up your axe. Whether it's puppets, or a story, or a Christian gift like Joshua, or graphics like Kendall, whatever it is, or singing, musical talents, helping other people in food lines, I don't care what it is. Tech skills. and take the Word of God with you and what you've been taught and start chopping wood. Take up the axe. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you so much for the time that you've given me here, for the time you've given me with each one of these kids, these young people. And I just pray that as I go forward that they would remember these things, that they would continue carrying on and serving you in their each in their own special way, in their own unique way. And they would keep chopping wood. Help them to be able to do this as they seek you. In your name we pray, amen. Amen. For my teens, they're in the back. Don't leave just yet. You can trade bigger or smaller if you like. Keep chopping wood. Keep chopping wood.
Oh my gosh.
Keep chopping wood. Caleb, keep chopping wood. Jenna, keep chopping wood.
Is that Cindy? Oh.
Keep chopping wood.
I thought it was wood. Right?